What's up, guys? It's Lefty here. Thank you for clicking on this video. And as you can tell by the title, this video is going to be a little different from what I've done on this channel in the past. I've covered a lot of sports betting educational topics, and to be honest, I'm kind of running out of some ideas. So after talking to some of the members of the Discord community, came up with an idea of doing a spin-off of something I've been doing in the Discord called Story Time, where I just tell personal stories from past experiences, mostly related to sports betting. I've told all types of stories of bad beats, big wins, stories mostly related to when I was a bookie. Now, to start this new series off, I'm going to go way back in time and talk about a bet that will forever be stuck with me. And not to get too dramatic here, but looking back now, almost 20 years later, it was a bet that really altered the direction of my life. If it had not gone the way it did, who knows how things would have turned out. But I started betting young. However old you are in fifth or sixth grade, that's about the time I started betting. But it was like innocent stuff. You know, my father, he was a really big bettor. This is him and I here on the golf course. We definitely played for money on this day. And the only reason I know this is because we always played for money. Some would probably label my old man as a degenerate sports bettor, but I can't really say that about my father. But he definitely bet big. He bet a lot, and he lost a lot. He'd let me pick a couple college football or NFL games each week to bet. I doubt he actually put my bets in through his bookie, but I learned about, kind of how everything works. Learned about spreads, over unders, how betting with a bookie on credit works, normal things a father teaches his son who's in the fifth grade. I also learned, that when you win, you get rewarded. And weeks that my father won were great. I don't remember having to actually pay when the bets I picked lost, but when I won, I got new cleats or sneakers or whatever I was into at that age. But it wasn't till about high school when I got my own real bookie. Now, for a lot of you watching this video, I'll have to explain how betting through a bookie was back in the early 2000s. You called your bookie on the phone to place bets. You met up with him in person weekly to pay or collect. This was way before all the different cash apps being available. Another big difference is not everyone could actually be a bookie. Besides it being a full-time job, being a bookie back in the day, you had to have a certain type of reputation. If you were a bookie and word ever got out that there was no consequences for not paying a debt, it'd be open season for that bookie. Everyone would just fire bets in, and if they won, great. If they lost, it'd be, see you later. And then there was like the stepping on toes element. Other bookies might not like someone new starting a sports book operation without permission. My first bookie was a guy named Carey, and he'd be the person that someone would have to get permission from if they wanted to be a bookie. He was actually just in the news a few years ago. This is Carey. A few years ago, he beat a guy half to death during the Khabib-McGregor fight at a bar near where I live, allegedly. Well, he was found guilty of it, but I'm sure it was all a big misunderstanding. Now, keep in mind, this incident took place in 2018 when Carey was 49, so he was older and less calmer at this point. So just for time reference, I'm betting through the 35-year-old version of this guy. And still to this day, he's the only bookie I know that there were no stories of bettors not paying him. There were a bunch of stories about what happened to bettors who tried to not pay him. And I bring all this up to kind of show the difference between a lot of bookie-bettor relationships nowadays. I wasn't betting through some college campus bookie or a buddy of mine. I was betting through this animal who probably looked forward to someone not being able to pay. Now, why would I bet through someone like this? Some of you might be wondering, and that's a great question. Carey had a bunch of people that worked for him, and I was originally referred to one of Carey's agents that worked for him. It wasn't until like a few months later that I realized that this guy worked for Carey. But in fact, pretty much every bookie in the North Shore of Boston during this time worked for Carey or had his permission to be a bookie. And also, there wasn't a ton of options to bet back then like there is today. You either had a street bookie or you flew to Vegas. you younger guys really have no idea how easy you have it betting sports today. But moving right along, Carrie is the first character in this story. I guess we can call him the villain. So the co-star would be my best friend Pat. This is Pat to the far right with the rose in his mouth. I've known Pat since third grade. Pat's one of those sports bettors that just think everything goes against him, overly negative. He could win a miracle, come from behind ninth inning walk-off bet on Thursday, lose a bet on Friday, and complain about how nothing ever goes his way. I'm sure some of you guys know the type I'm talking about, but Pat didn't have a bookie of his own. So how it went is he'd come up with his own picks. He'd give them to me, and then I would call them into Carrie when I was placing my bets. And Pat and I would just keep track of our balances. But as far as Carrie knew, it was just me, and he didn't know anything about Pat. I did try having Pat get his own separate account through Carrie, but Pat didn't want to. And looking back, that was a smart thing. It wasn't his ass on the line if shit went bad. But neither of us had real jobs or steady income. In our mind, betting was our idea of making money. Real young and stupid we were. One week we found ourselves down $1,800 before the weekend even started. Now, I knew he was down pretty big, but didn't realize how much I was down. When I calculated the figure Friday night and saw 1,800, I knew we were in deep shit. 1,800 might not seem like a big number to some, but we were two kids fresh out of high school with no jobs. We had already used up a lot of our, parent loan bailout options one too many times. But Pat and I were no strangers to losing weeks. But what happened a lot is if I had a bad week, he'd have an okay week, and our figure owed to carry would be manageable, and then we kind of figure it out. But this particular week, we both had unbelievably bad weeks. I mean, both of us were just ice cold. To be down 1,800, betting $50 a game each, is about as cold as it gets. The week wasn't even over yet. We were down 1,800 going into college football Saturday. And that's when I think it both hit us that, what we got ourselves into, because we were both sick to our stomachs. We didn't even bet college football that day for fear of digging ourselves a deeper hole. And around this time, too, word was that Carrie had just broke this kid Ryan Cantwell's nose the week prior because this kid Cantwell lost and couldn't pay. He didn't even say he wouldn't pay. He just couldn't and needed time and still got his nose broken. So Sundays are the last day of the week. Monday or Tuesdays when you pay out. Pat and I talked about our options Sunday morning. We both didn't have any realistic ideas of coming up with 1,800 in a day or two. So ultimately what we decided to do was try and bet NFL Sunday and win it back, or at least get it down to 1,000. That was the number we thought we might be able to come up with by, selling or pawning possessions like video games or golf clubs or whatever. Now, I don't remember what happened on the 1 p.m. games or 4 p.m. games. All I know is going into Sunday Night Football, we were down 1,880 exactly. And I'll never forget this game for as long as I live. Sunday night game, Browns, Ravens. Baltimore was favored by 6.5, and the total was 36. Now, besides being down 1,880, Pat and I had another dilemma. We couldn't just bet 1,880 straight up on a team. How would that look being down 1,880 with our average bet size of 50 or 100, and I calling a bet for almost 2,000? He wouldn't take a bet like that, knowing it's very likely a bus ticket bet. For those of you who don't know what a bus ticket bet is, it's a bet that you make if you lose. You just buy a bus ticket and leave town, which was actually looking like a real option for Pat and I, or at least me. Remember, there's debts on me. The account's in my name. But so because we couldn't just call in a $2,000 bet, we decided to bet every type of combo bet possible on this Sunday Night Football game. Remember, there was no same game parlays or player props and stuff. We had to just bet the side and total. And before even figuring out what team we were going to bet, we figured doing a $200 parlay. We figured that's going to pay $480. A $200 A&R, that would pay $800. An A&R is an action reverse. It's kind of like a parlay, but it pays 4-1 odds instead of 2.5-1 like a parlay. But there's juice on an A&R. If you lose both ends of an A&R, it's double the bet and double the juice. That's what you got to pay if it loses. So that's the catch for getting the 4-1 odds. Then we figured we'd do a $200 tease. That'd pay 200, then 200 straight on a side, and then 200 straight on the total. And now what's really crazy about all this is if we won both the side and total, like if every bet won, the payout would be exactly what we were down, 1880. We didn't even do the math of what it would be if it lost because it didn't matter. We couldn't pay it anyway. Winning was the only option, and we had to win all of them. We still had to decide on who to pick, though, and time was ticking. I think deep down we both knew we were going to end up, betting the favorite in the over, which I know now is the square side, especially on primetime games, betting the favorite in the over. That's what pretty much everyone does. But what ultimately decided who we'd bet on for this game, we made our minds up during pregame when we saw Baltimore wearing all black uniforms. It was the first time they ever did the blackout. And plus, my favorite player was Ray Lewis at the time. So we figured that was as good a reason as any, And this is what the bets were. These are the bets I called in here. We did a $200 parlay, Ravens minus 6.5 over 36. Hoping that would pay the 480. $200 A&R, Ravens minus 6.5 over 36. That'd pay 800. $200 teaser, Ravens minus half a point and over 30. Hoping to pay 200. 200 Ravens straight, and then $200 on the over. Placing those bets was, I remember being really awkward, but I got them in. Pat came over to my parents' house. We watched the game in my living room. My parents sleeping not too far away. We didn't sit down the entire game. I remember that. At no point during the game did it look like we were going to win. We basically, started to come to the realization that we were fucked. And, we started to play out different scenarios of what could possibly happen. I was telling Pat that I had to tell Carey that he was involved and it wasn't just all on me. Pat kept coming up with crazy suggestions like maybe you can ask your rich aunt to help us. And I'd say, well, maybe you can ask, your girlfriend's parents. These were like real conversations we were having back and forth. And I mean, at this point, the game's pretty much over. There's 50 seconds left. The Browns have the ball deep in the Ravens' own end. It's 2nd and goal. The score is 13-20. Yeah, the teaser is winning, but doesn't really matter if everything else loses. If the Browns score a TD, it puts the game over the total, but we'll lose the Ravens minus 6.5. The only way we win this game is a Ravens TD. The Miami Dolphins what happens on this play really is just like an act of God. It's a Sunday Night Football miracle. I get chills still watching it. It's really unreal. This clip has 930 something views. I've watched it easily 500 times. I don't know how many times Pat's watched it, but, now I've been involved in sports betting my entire adult life. I've had some really big bets on the line, some crazy sweats. I don't think anything will ever match this sweat I had on this game from start to end, or the feeling of joy, or relief, I should say I had. Ed Reed's forever in Pat and I's heart, because really, if you think about it, if any other player in the league picks that ball off, they're going to kneel it or run out of bounds. But Ed takes it 106 yards the other way for a TD. He's the only player that would and could do something like that. In a weird way, though, that single event played a pivotal role in my life. I ultimately ended up working for Carey a couple months later. And then, I ended up filling a void that he left when he went to prison for 12 years. In fact, those news articles about the barroom brawl from 2018, that happened not too long after he had gotten out of prison. and then he went back to prison after that brawl. If I lost that bet, who knows what would have happened. Sometimes I think that win is kind of what attracted me to life sports betting. I've always worked in sports betting. I was a bookie for, most of my 20s. Connections I've made during my time as a bookie, led me to working, for some offshore sports books. I've worked in risk management for gaming companies, and more recently worked in sports information, worked for Action Network, Sports Insights. Before I started recording this video, I texted Pat, Ed Reed, like anytime I bring it up to him, it's just like we share one of those moments we'll never forget. He wrote, "How could I ever forget?" Same thing. I could never forget. And I have a lot more stories. This one's kind of like a PG 13 rated story, but I got some good ones, and hopefully you guys will find them entertaining. But yeah, that's going to do it for this one. Stay tuned for the next one.